I have with me, and I'm not making this up, folks. Really, I'm not. I'm not saying it to make him feel good or you feel good or anything. I have with me one of the smartest black men on this side of heaven, and I met Chad O. Jackson during the filming of the Uncle Tom movies, one and two, and his research was I've never seen anyone well other than Bill. I've never seen anyone who did such thorough research on his work or if you really want to know what's going on. And smart and entrepreneur and black. What's up? And they said it couldn't be done in America. Just not true. I have with me Chad O. Jackson. He is an entrepreneur, researcher, best known for his 2022 film Uncle Tom 2. Chad advocate. Uh, I don't know what that is. And Jared's not out there, right? Chad advocate for more moral Christian ethics, family values, independence, and intentional citizenship. And it's an honor to have you back on, Chad. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Jesse, thank you for having me. It's good
Yes,
to be
sir.
here.
It is Men History Month, so August is Men History. Happy Men History Month.
Same to you. Happy Men's History Month.
Eh, Thank you. He's kind of dark. Do y'all want to show him that way? He look extra black. We can't do anything about that, Jesse. Oh, okay. Oh, I shouldn't be reading that out loud. Oh, so Chad, you sitting in a kind of a dark room with the light is not bright enough. We can see you, but not like we normally see you. Are you okay with that?
That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, uh, tell the people what is before I get to he has his brand new film coming out soon, folks, about Martin Luther King Jr. and it's interesting. But what is intentional citizenship?
Intentional citizenship means basically taking America back, understanding what it means to preserve our constitutional republic. In so many ways, we are losing it due to multiculturalism, due to this push for a kind of global country. And this has been happening for, I would argue, well over 100 or 150 years. And so, what I mean when I say intentional citizenship is realizing that America is ours and we don't just keep it just because we're born here. We have to actually fight to keep it.
Yeah. Um, is it possible that America will ever come back? Is that possible that we can ever have real America back again?
It is possible, but it won't happen overnight. I think it will take another 200 years to really win it back, and it has to be done in a multifaceted way. It has to be done with the churches preaching the gospel again. It has to happen with men being men again, women being real women again. It has to happen by taking back the education system, taking back basically the institutions. It has to happen within the culture, quite frankly. It has to happen in a very pervasive way. And I believe people are beginning to wake up. And that's part of the reason why we made this project, the MLK project, is because I believe that a lot of us are kind of caught under a spell
Yeah.
where we believe certain things about our country, about our so called heroes, so on and so forth, that is neutralizing us and defanging us to the point where we aren't actually fighting to hold our country together because we believe that what we're doing is progressive and the right thing when in reality it's anything but.
But the young people are being so educated in a wrong way in such a deceiving way, generation after generation. And most of them don't know about the Constitution. They don't really know how things really were. How will, how, knowing how brainwashed young people are, really of all races, how would that? I mean, how would that help bring back America if they've been taught wrong generation
Yeah,
after generation?
yeah, that's exactly the concern that I have too, Jesse, and that's the reason why um, I think to the extent that people believe that it will happen overnight, you already lost.
Yeah,
But if you are interested in playing the long game and having more babies and teaching those babies the right way, and basically putting out content and curriculum and information and documentaries that challenge the wrong way that's being taught right now, to the extent that we begin to push back with good resources, such as what we're trying to do with this project.
yeah.
Um, I believe that it's going to take time, but we have to do the work.
Amazing. Your film about Martin Luther King is coming out soon. According to NBC News, the Trump administration released thousands of records on Martin Luther King Jr. assassination,
Hmm.
and his family members were against it. Do you think that Trump did the right thing or the wrong thing?
I think Trump attempted to do the right thing. It is necessary to release the files, and as we know, those files were supposed to be released already in 2027, so in 2 years. The problem is that what was released, I think, it was around 230,000 files that were released
Right.
earlier in the month. Those files, so they're not the entirety of the files. There's a lot that's missing. There's a lot that wasn't released, that basically exposes the truth of who MLK was. Now, I have gone through many of the files. I haven't gotten through all 230,000 documents, but really what they expose is much of what we already knew, that he had connections with many communists, that he was basically doing the bidding of communists. We already knew this, but these recent files corroborated that and basically reinforced that uh, those realities. But I do think Republican or Democrat, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The reality is the government has a desire to, in a sense, maintain the image of who MLK was. Whenever those files were released, or the morning those files were released, Pam Bondi posted to her ex account a picture of her hugged up with Alveda King, saying, it's about time America knows the truth. We need to, and she talks about Martin Luther King's greatness. And as soon as I saw that post, I knew that, oh, we're not about to get all these files.
Yeah.
You just knew it because, again, whether it's Trump, and I think Trump is doing a lot of good things, but the reality of it is, I think a lot of this information and a lot of these narratives, they go deeper than Trump. They transcend regime changes and, this president coming in, that president going out. It's much bigger than all of that because they have to maintain this image of people like Martin Luther King, people like Franklin D. Roosevelt and Abraham Lincoln and others that we've been taught are heroes. They have to preserve that image because it's all about control. It's all about keeping people in line so that we aren't intentional citizens, so we aren't doing what needs to be done to take our country back.
Amazing. What do you think would miss? Oh, let me ask this first. The civil rights movement, Martin Luther King, and that whole movement thing. So, are you saying that it was there were communist people involved in that, and did Martin Luther King know it? Did he participate? Is that the way he wanted it to be?
Yeah, Martin Luther King was definitely a Marxist. He studied Marx in college. He learned how to basically hide his Marxism behind this idea that he was a pastor, even though he didn't really believe in Jesus like that. I mean, he wrote about not believing that Jesus was, born of a virgin, that he didn't believe that Jesus rose from the dead. He didn't believe the basic tenets of Christianity, yet he's walking around as if he's a pastor. his real agenda was to push Marxism. He wrote to his girlfriend at the time, who would later become his wife, that these Marxist tenets like redistribution of wealth and no more wars and all these things, he said that this is the gospel that I will preach to the world. And so it's not the gospel of the Bible. He's talking about Marxism. This is the gospel that I
Oh,
will preach to the world. And so shortly after he graduated college, he teamed up with people like Bayard Rustin, who was a communist functionary. He used to be with the Young Communist League and was doing a lot of organizing and agitating for the Communist Party at a kind of informal capacity. He teamed up with Stanley Levison, who was a New York Jewish communist, a top financier for many communist front groups in New York. He teamed up with a communist lawyer, an entertainment lawyer in Los Angeles named Clarence B. Jones. And from there, his organization, which was called the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, was chock full of communist functionaries who worked previously for an organization called the Southern Christian or the Southern Negro Youth Congress. There were ministers who, or so-called ministers, who were with this organization who were communists, who flooded the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which Martin Luther King would later come to head. And so the reality of it is, King was surrounded by communists, and he knew he was. It wasn't as if he was, caught off guard or anything like that. But what was interesting is that anytime he would be asked by a reporter, "Hey, are there communists in your organization?" he would always lie and say no. He would act like a deer in the headlights. No, of course there's not communists in my organization, knowing full well that there was. So, I mean, this is a man who was considered to be the moral leader of the nation,
yeah.
and he's actively lying on national television about what's going on. And as we would find out, he not only were there communists in his organization, there was a direct line of communication between the Soviet Union and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
What I remember, from what I can remember about it when it first started, is I remember the older black men and women did not want us to participate in the so-called civil rights movement, and they were saying that Martin Luther King Jr. wasn't real and it wasn't no good. They were like, "Don't get involved with that." Did we lose it?
No, I'm here.
Oh, okay. Yeah, your film went out for a minute.
Okay.
Um, they were saying, "Don't get involved with that mess." Martin Luther King, Martin Luther King Jr. is not real about that, and they didn't want us to be involved in that. So it seems like some of the older black generation understood it wasn't what he was saying that it was. How was he able? How was he able to preach like that, and so many black people followed him? I, and he was a communist, as you said, he was a communist. How was he able to get away with that in
That's a
such a
really good
big
question.
way?
That's a really good question. So there was a communist who worked for Dr. King named Hunter Pitts Odell, or Jack Odell for short, is what people called him. And the Southern Christian Leadership Conference by the early 60s found that they couldn't allow their organization to grow, or they had a lot of trouble trying to get their organization to grow. And the reason for it was because many of the older blacks in the South didn't want anything to do with the civil rights movement.
Yeah,
They saw Martin Luther King as an agitator, they saw him as a troublemaker, and they didn't want to be caught up, with what MLK had going on. And so Jack Odell and James Bevel, he was another one. I think it was actually more James Bevel than Jack Odell. But James Bevel had this bright idea to go into the schools and get the children riled up and get them angered and get them embittered, because he said, and I quote, "We believe that if we can get to the children, we can get to the adults."
yeah,
So this was their strategy. And so what they would do is they would go into schools like they did in Birmingham, get these kids out of school and pour them into the streets so that they could basically antagonize the police departments to turn dogs and hoses on the children, so that the parents will then be angered and then get them more and more involved, and they see King as some kind of hero who came to save the day, when the reality of it is all of it was planned all along. There were some
That's
there were some
amazing.
sheriffs and police chiefs who knew what King was up to, because they tried this in other cities like Albany, Georgia, for example, where they came into the city and they tried to get the kids riled up. And the idea was, for example, with the police chief there in Albany, he knew what King was had going on. So they knew that his faction was coming to Albany, and they said, "Look, King's going to come. They're not going to pull any permits. They're going to try to march in the streets, and we have to arrest people who are unlawfully demonstrating and parading without a permit." So our jail can only hold so many people. What we need to do is we need to team up with local neighboring towns to be able to put people in those jails if our jails fill up. And the reason why he knew this is what the reason why he wanted to do it this way is because it was common practice in those days to where if people are demonstrating and parading without a permit, if you can't put them in jail, you have to use other means to disperse the crowd, which includes dogs, which includes fire hoses, which includes batons and all the things. They used to do this not only with blacks, but with whites too.
Yeah.
You can find video footage right now of them dispersing crowds in this way, dating as far back as the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, where they were dispersing all white labor unions who were unlawfully gathering. You have a right to gather and to demonstrate because you have a First Amendment right of free speech, but you have to do it lawfully. You still have to control for traffic, for noise, for all the
Yeah.
things, because we are a country of order and laws. And so you can do it. You just have to pull the permit. So they weren't having a lot of success doing this until they got to Baltimore, because apparently Bull Connor didn't get the memo. Whenever they so what they did was they went into the schools in Birmingham. The teachers and administrators allowed for Martin Luther King's group to come into the schools and to show the kids, because the kids were none the wiser. They didn't know what was going on.
Right.
They were happy, like there was nothing wrong. What James Bevel and King did is they came in and they were allowed to show the kids propaganda film to try to get them angry, to try to get them riled up. They would also do things like tell the black kids, like, look, don't you notice, just like Satan, don't you notice how you get the hand-me-down books and how you get the mismatched uniforms from the other white schools? Like, they don't like you. They don't treat you the same. Never mind the fact that the Negro schools are actually getting more funding than the white schools in many cases. And as we would later realize, the problem is that many of these Negro school administrators were misappropriating the funds. A lot of it was landing in their pockets in some cases. And then in other cases, a lot of Negro school administrators, even though they would get the money and get lots of money, they would they were more thrifty with the money. And so what that means is, instead of buying brand new textbooks, they would just repurpose the textbooks from other white schools or from other Negro schools so they can let the money stretch. It wasn't a situation where the white administrators were, putting the Negroes last. That's a myth we find in many cases. But that didn't matter to Martin Luther King and his group. They would lie to these kids to try to get them embittered, try to get them riled up. And so they said, look, we're going to have something called D Day. And on D Day, y'all are going to get out of class, go to 16th Street Baptist Church in Baltimore, or in Birmingham,
Right.
and they were going to take to the streets and march. And so that's exactly what they did. Bull Connor rounded them all up and arrested them, to where the jails were able to fill up very quickly. And it was at that point on the next day where they didn't have any place to put these kids. And so they got out the dogs, they got out the fire hoses. And as soon as they started to turn the dogs and the hoses on these teenagers, that's when the cameras started to roll. And when they did that, those images went all out around the country, around the
Around the
world.
world,
Everybody
yeah.
saw it. They were dismayed. They were displeased. Why are they doing this to these Negroes? They're just trying to get their freedom. They're just trying to get their rights. This is tried and true Hegelian dialectic. Is tried and true Marxist tactics, and King benefited from it insofar that he was looked at as a hero when in reality he put these kids in harm's way. When it's important to note he never allowed his own kids to participate in these marches and in these protests. He would use other people's kids, but he would never use his own kids. Um,
That's
and this,
amazing. You're right about that. I don't remember ever seeing his
right,
kids be involved in it.
right, but this had the desired effect insofar that many Negro adults began to come around eventually and say, "Oh, why are they doing this to our kids? We're just trying to vote. We're just trying to do this. We're just trying to do that." And so they were able to get to the adults by going through the kids.
Wow. So Martin Luther King's father, he was supposed to have been a preacher. Was he a socialist too, or was he a real preacher?
He was a socialist.
The father?
He his the father was a socialist. In his unpublished memoir, he considered himself or called himself a purveyor of the social gospel, which all that means is I preach socialism masked as Christianity. In fact, whenever he visited Germany uh, before the rise of Hitler, he was enamored of Martin Luther, the 16th century reformer. And one of the things that attracted him to Martin Luther, because his original name is Michael King. That's his birth name,
So this
Michael
is
King.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s daddy, right? His father.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
That's right. So his original name is Michael King. He visited Germany and learned of Martin Luther. He must have gotten a kind of skewed version of the history of Martin Luther, but what he saw Martin Luther as was somebody who came and who wrestled away authority from the Catholic Church and caused a reformation and gave that authority to the people. And so that's what attracted him to Martin Luther. He came back to the United States and changed his name to Martin Luther King. And he changed his son's name to Martin Luther King Jr. He saw himself as the American Martin Luther who would basically take Christianity in America, rock it to its core, and revolutionize it by pushing the so called social gospel, which is basically, once again, Marxism. That's all the social gospel is, where
Well,
the gospel
Chad, hold
basically,
that thought. Hold that thought. Sorry to cut you off,
yeah.
but hold that thought. I got to take a quick break. Back in a moment. 888-77 Jesse. This is so interesting to me. I'm not even doing a commercial right now. I want to go get back to my guest, Chad O. Jackson. Chad O. Jackson. Now you see what I mean? He is one of the smartest black men I ever met. And he has a brand new film coming out, the MLK Project, and an historical account, and it's coming out soon. You gotta see it. We're gonna tell you in a minute how to get it. But Chad, just finish the point you were making about Martin Luther King Jr.'s daddy. I didn't know he was a socialist as well.
Yeah, so he was a socialist, and the thing about him, which is the same, which is also true of a lot of people, I guess, of his generation and of his contingent. These kind of self-professed intellectuals who were behind the pulpit and were preaching and teaching this kind of social gospel, is they still held true to to many traditions and to many ways of looking at things, but they disagreed with the free market system. They disagreed with, I guess, capitalism, to put it in a word, and they believed that socialism would be the thing that would liberate the Negro. So this is what people like uh, King Sr. believed. And
Wow.
so once again, he changed his name to Martin Luther King Sr. because he saw himself as the figure or the individual. He saw him and his son as the duo who would, in a sense, wrestle away kind of authority and popularity from Christianity in America and to revolutionize it by pushing the social gospel, which is, once again, it's socialism under the guise of Christianity.
Right.
It looks like Christianity to a lot of people who aren't paying attention, but really underneath it, all it is socialism, and it differs from the gospel, the biblical gospel, because the biblical gospel calls man to repent,
Yeah.
to turn from his wicked ways, to trust in Christ for the forgiveness of their sins, and to teach them how to walk as a new man. That's what the gospel is basically in a nutshell. Whereas the social gospel, which is what Martin Luther King Jr. and Sr. were preaching, uh, doesn't put the onus on you to repent, but it puts the onus on society and systems to change, to push for policies and legislation that brings about equity and equality uh, by extortion and coercing the taxpayer to pay those who aren't interested in working, into paying for the bread lines and for paying for welfare and things of this nature. So the social gospel is not the gospel at all, and I'm putting it in the most basic way that I possibly can.
Right.
But that is what Martin Luther King Sr. wanted to do, and it would actually be his son who would go further than him in implementing it, especially when it comes to the so-called black church.
So Martin Luther King Jr. really didn't go up to the top of the mountain, looked over, and saw the glory of the coming of the Lord.
No, he sure didn't. He sure didn't. Nor did he write that.
Who
Lord
wrote
have
that?
mercy. His handlers. He had a list of. He
Oh,
had a team of advisors and speechwriters who wrote all of his speeches, and he would deliver
wow.
them. The thing about King is he had something like a photographic memory. He grew up watching his dad preach, so he understood oratory skills. He understood the the basics of delivering an
Yeah.
effective speech. He understood pacing and inflection. These are the kind of things that King grew up watching and seeing. According to those who were close to him, King was an extraordinary mimic. He can impersonate anyone, almost to a T. And
Huh.
so he was a really good actor. I think if he wasn't a pastor, and I say this not to be funny, but I think if he wasn't a pastor, he would have made for an extraordinary actor, kind of like in a kind of Sidney Poitier
Yeah.
uh, caliber. But he was really effective as a as a giver
Yeah.
of speeches. But we knew that he was disingenuous with these speeches that he would give. For example, with the mountaintop speech, after having delivered that speech saying, I may not get there with you,
Right.
but we as a people will get to the promised land. And you can see the emotion in his face. You can hear the trembling in his voice. He's moving the crowd. But then later that night, he would go and sleep with, I think, one or two women who weren't his wife, and then beat up another woman. And so these, like, King was a scoundrel. I say that not again. I say that not to be salacious or to
Right.
be, uh, you know, um, um, to be. I say that not to be funny. I say that because it's true. It's true. And the reality of it is that King was a liability to the civil rights movement. And the communists knew this, and the feds knew this. And this is the reason why they wanted to remove him from his post. They wanted to make a martyr out of him because they understood that he was better to the movement dead than he was alive. Because if he was alive, you never know what kind of
Yeah.
newspaper article will be released that will jeopardize the entirety of the civil rights movement. If he's dead and he doesn't pose a threat to the movement, you can then use his name to push policies, to push legislation, to change the world in the way that you want to change the world. And I know that gets very convoluted and confusing to a lot of people. Why, like, who's a good guy, who's a bad guy in the scenario? I don't think there is a good guy in the scenario. I don't think Martin Luther King was a good guy. I don't think the communists were the good guy, and I don't think the feds were a good guy. There is no good guys and bad guys, and then too, the Republicans weren't the good guys, and the Democrats weren't the good guys.
Yeah.
There is no good guys. The only good guy is the person in the mirror, if you will allow him to be, by first turning to God,
Yeah.
because God is the ultimate good guy. We can align ourselves with the good guy, with God, or we can basically fall for the tricks of the world that's being played out in front of us on a daily basis. But the reality of it is the civil rights movement was not what any of us thought it was. It wasn't started organically as this grassroots thing that sprung up out of nowhere. The civil rights movement was started by the feds in the Communist Party. The first iteration of it was called the National Negro Congress, and that was started under President FDR. The National Negro Congress, the reason why the feds had an interest in starting this civil rights movement called the National Negro Congress is because they wanted to wrestle away uh, authority from the states. They wanted to usurp states' rights and usurp state sovereignty, and they wanted to have that power for themselves, for the federal government. They wanted to broaden the authority of the federal government. That's what they wanted to do, and they saw the civil rights movement as a means to doing that because the civil rights movement could basically agitate the states and expose the states as being incapable of governing themselves. And to the extent that the public believes that the states are incapable of governing themselves, they will cry out to the federal government to come in and to become bigger, to become more powerful.
Yeah.
The National Negro Congress was started not only by the feds, but also with the help of Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union. It was a team effort. Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union's interest in the civil rights movement was to use it to usher in Marxism and communism into the United States and into the West at large. So they both had the same tactic, they just had different ultimate agendas and ultimate goals, and they would often clash. They would clash over a number of questions, chief among them being who should be the leader or the figurehead of this movement. The communists believe it should be King, the feds believed should be somebody like a Philip Randolph or a John Lewis or someone like that. A. Philip Randolph, he was the figurehead of the civil rights movement in the 1930s and 40s, and he would be replaced by Martin Luther King. And if you go back and watch footage of the civil rights movement, you'll see something very peculiar. You'll see A. Philip Randolph, who's old and gray, he has gray hair, and he's always introducing Martin Luther King as the moral leader of our nation. Anytime he introduces King, the moral leader of our nation is what he always called him. This was A. Philip Randolph basically passing on the baton to Martin Luther King as the new leader of the movement. That's all that was. And
Oh,
again,
mess.
when you look at, because a lot of people think that the FBI tried to get King to kill himself. That's not true. It's not true at all. When King got a letter from the FBI telling him to step aside, they again, it goes back to them seeing and knowing that King was a philanderer, that he was uh, involved in many orgies and sex parties and all these things, and they were afraid that that would come back to bite them in their efforts because they wanted to expand the role of the federal government. So there was uh, a guy who worked for the FBI named William Sullivan, and William Sullivan wrote this letter to King. It wasn't J. Edgar Hoover, it was William Sullivan. Wrote this letter to King saying, "We know about your philandering. We know about the things that you're doing. You're disgusting. You're an embarrassment. You're an embarrassment to the cause. You need to step aside. He said, you know what you need to do, and you have X amount of days to do it." A lot of people interpret that to mean if you don't do what we're trying to get you to do, we're going to kill you, or you may as well go ahead and kill yourself. That's not what he was trying to say. What he was saying is, if you do not step aside from the movement, we are going to leak these tapes and this information to the press, and they are going to embarrass you. That was the or else. The or else wasn't we're going to kill you. The or
Right.
else was we're going to leak this to the press. And so again, it was all a war between the communists and the feds over who should lead the movement because they both wanted to use it for their own cause. And I understand you know, I understand that's confusing to a lot of people, including Matt Gaetz, whose show I went on, Congressman Matt Gaetz, whose show I went on not too long ago, where he tried to like I feel like we were having two different conversations. He wanted to make it a Democrat versus Republican thing, and I said it has nothing to do with that. It's much bigger and much deeper than that. We have to stop thinking about that.
Yeah.
King is used by both the Democrats and the Republicans to move us more towards socialism. And to the extent that we pick a side instead of seeing the truth for what it is, we're going to keep falling into this trap again and again and again.
That's amazing. And so the papers that we wanted. that they wanted President Trump to release. The, so they're not releasing all of these papers because it's this kind of information that we will find out as well.
That's correct.
And
That's
so,
correct.
and so if that's true, are you saying the Trump administration is helping to cover up that too?
I that's a very interesting question. I don't know if that's a really good question. I'm not going to go so far as to say that Trump is helping to cover it up. All I know is that what we have isn't the entirety of the files. When it comes to these intelligence agencies and the personnel who exist within these agencies, many of these people have been around for multiple presidencies. They know things that Trump don't know, and they know things that Pam Bondi don't know, and Tulsi Gabbard and others. And sure, they have access to files, but their time is like the clock starts ticking as soon as they take office. We
Yeah,
only have four-year terms, and you're talking about information and an agenda that dates way back to the turn of the 20th century, so over 100 years. And the agenda in this kind of post-war consensus has always been so-called progressivism and liberalism on the way to globalism. They envision a borderless world where everybody is under the control of one government. This is what they want, and they're playing the long game to get us there. And this is bigger than Trump. This is bigger than Bondi. This is bigger than Tulsi Gabbard. And when you look at people like King, and when you look at the feminist movement, and you look at the gay liberation movement, which would later become the LGBT movement, when you look at what's going on with this whole Islamic thing, um, this is all working within this kind of concerted effort to mobilize people and to silence people all at the same time, to neutralize us, to make us dependent on the system. And so this is, I guess, my long,
yeah.
whimsical way of answering your question. Uh, to like, is Trump trying to cover it up? Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I don't know. All I know is that we don't have the entirety of the files.
So because of time here, how do you know all this? I mean, where you getting all this information from?
So a lot of this information in terms of what the feds have done in terms of the starting of the civil rights movement and all this is all well documented. Um, when you look at the FBI files, a lot of it comes from the FBI files. When you look at also the communist documents, the communists have done a really good job of archiving all of their information. You can go to Marxist.org, which is one of their archive websites, and you can read correspondence. You can read the words of their own visionaries that basically speaks to what it is they're trying to do, dating as far back as the late 1800s. All that information is available. When it comes to King, I mean, we have, you know, like volumes and volumes of MLK papers. This is, I believe, the one I'm holding in my hand right now is the sixth volume, and I have all the volumes of his papers where he's talking about his love for Marxism, and you have to really understand what it is you're reading and and
Yeah,
looking at. It's about cross-referencing the work of research um, and delving through the archives. It's a very daunting task, but I think
yeah.
it's a rewarding task because you get the information and you're able to share it with other people in hopes that you can save the country.
What um man, the Martin Luther King Senior, I mean Martin Luther King Jr. Are his children little Marxists too?
I can only go off of what they say. A Marxist will always tell you they're not a Marxist, but you have
Right.
to watch what they do and listen to what they say.
Yeah.
And I mean, it takes nothing more than scrolling through, for example, Bernice King's IG page to realize, yeah, she's a Marxist too.
Wow.
MLK the third, he's a Marxist too. When you look at the basic tenets of what Marxists believe, namely redistributionist policies and DEI and all this, it's very easy to ascribe the Marxist label to these people. And yes, I do believe King and even Alveda King. I think in many ways, and I say this not to be mean, but in many ways, she's kind of living in the uh, the light of King's popularity, because she's always referencing my uncle King, Dr. King, my uncle Dr. King. But the reality is, I think she is, in a sense, hurting her message, because if she's all about, you know, being anti-abortion and getting back to family values, if that's her message, you can't do that at the same time you're promoting Dr. King, because King is antithetical to those things. He was a recipient of the first Margaret Sanger Award.
Yeah.
So how can you claim to be anti-abortion, but yet you're holding up somebody who was a recipient of the first Margaret Sanger Award? That doesn't make any sense. How could you promote family values while holding up King, who was antithetical to family values?
So
He may have looked
Albie,
the part,
I'm sorry.
but King may have looked the part in terms of family values, but he was defaming family values with his own lifestyle on a daily basis.
So Alveda King is the niece of Martin Luther King Jr., and she's a pro-life promoter. Do you, is it possible she doesn't know all this about him? Maybe she's like dumb like the rest of us, and we don't know all that. Is that
It's hard.
possible?
It's hard to say, but I mean, you would think, being the niece and being
Yeah.
that close, and having her grandfather being Martin Luther King Sr., that she would know better than any of us what the social gospel is. She's been around enough churches to understand the difference between the social gospel and the real gospel, and understand that King was preaching the former and certainly not the latter. And so I don't know what I think. I think on Alveda King's part, and I say this not to be messy, but I think maybe there's some opportunism there, and that's
Uh,
a vice that we all have as human beings.
yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
we live in a fallen state, but the reality of it is, like, a lot of us are opportunists, and we take advantage of and ride on the coattails of things in order to make much of ourselves. I think there's something like that going on as far as she's concerned, but at the same time, I do believe that she's genuine in her approach of trying to save babies who are being aborted, and things of this nature. I think she's genuine in her approach, but I think that there's some opportunism going on there as well.
Oh, okay. Chad, because of time, give me a quick yes or no. And Jesse Jackson and all those people who were marching with King and carried on with him, were they? Do you know if they were socialists too, or were they aware at the time of what they were doing as well, promoting socialism?
Yes, they were. I mean, when Jesse Jackson in particular, he was in cahoots with the same communist functionaries who King was in cahoots with, and Al Sharpton was an informant to the FBI. So we know that he was representative of the federal kind of use of the civil rights movement. So yeah, they were in on it as well.
I want to, because of time again, man. I knew this was going to be interesting and we would need 8 hours, but I want to play the trailer from your new film, the MLK Project. Can we play that, Nick? Watch this, folks.
I have a dream.
If you found out, allegedly, that Martin Luther King Jr. was involved in some wild, freaky that seems like every other nigga you know.
That my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
Would it change how you see him?
Nope.
No.
Not at all.
He got hit in the head with a rock, nigga, singing We Shall Overcome.
I have a dream today.
It don't get any better. He said he deserves some yeah, he deserved whatever he wanted. He fought for us.
The moral leader of our nation.
Our leader, Dr. King.
Our leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.
Dr. King was our leader.
He who controls the narrative of the past, controls the policies of the present, and the conditions of the future.
If Dr. King was about judging people by the content of their character rather than the color of their skin, should we judge King by the content of his character?
Dr. King, it's been alleged that you have been slow to sever your ties with alleged communists.
Stanley Lepson, yeah, he's always in his ear.
I mean, he wrote everything that MLK said publicly.
Always in his ear.
He rejected the deity of Christ, the resurrection, the virgin birth. He rejected a literal hell.
Can we trust someone that appears to be faithful to a movement,
but he's not faithful to his family.
King's relationship with the fundamental gospel of the Bible is absolutely non-existent.
Martin Luther King is the founding father, or the kind of shifting, if you will, into America 2.0. And my question for anybody is, are we better for it?
Man. Jesse, you already. Oh, are we on a break or what?
Don't worry about it. Just say goodbye with Chad normally,
Chad.
and then we'll go.
Chad, tell the people how to get your movie, when it's coming out. It's amazing, man. We're going to have you back when this movie come out, too, because I knew we didn't have enough time with you this hour. Tell the folks when it's coming out, how to get it, and what to expect.
So this is actually a docu-series, so it's multiple parts, it's multiple episodes, not just one film.
Okay.
And you can find out more at historev.com. That's HISTOREV, historev.com. And we were looking at mid to late October of this coming out.
That's amazing. Nick, you had a question for him? Yeah, we don't have time. Oh, okay. The Anchor Baby had a question. Last word, Chad, because of time, man. We already going over, myself having a fit. Last word from you.
Yeah, I mean, worship God and not man.
Yeah.
Is really what it boils down to. King is somebody who's been placed on a pedestal. There's a 40-foot statue of him in Washington, D.C. We have a national holiday named after him. We have erected him into a kind of God. And he's not God. He's no deity, and he will lead us astray. So we have to worship God and not man.
So it doesn't matter to most black people what you put out. They gonna, as they were saying in the movie there, they don't care about all that other stuff, right? They don't care that he was a communist, socialist. They don't care, right?
They don't care. That's why we need to focus on the next generation and ignore the blacks.
Amazing. Thank you, man. I know we were supposed to have kept you for 30 minutes. I appreciate your patience of staying over. You said you would never run for government. You tweeted that out. Why not?
Because somebody like me will get slaughtered in the polls. People want to be lied to. People want to be massaged and told that they're so great, but the reality of it is, I think that the real change starts in the home. It starts in the mirror.
Yeah.
And it's not politics that's going to change everything. It's what we do in our own homes that's going to change things. And that's the message that I preach. And most people don't want to hear that. They want somebody else to do it for them.
Yeah.
And so I think for that simple reason, I will never win an elected office.
You're right. Anchor Baby, ask you a question. It's such a good question. We're already late.
Okay, Chad. See,
this is the Anchor Baby.
Hey, Chad.
Anchor
awesome
Baby.
interview.
Okay.
Let me ask real quick. You were talking about stability and the control these people, the government basically has over the people. You know, to keep Martin Luther King going is tantamount to keeping some sort of stability, to keep that image going, right? So I was hearing you say that. I was wondering, keeping that control and stability, did that also make the country great somehow, and like big, in some other ways?
No, it was the private sector that kept the country great. It was Christians who kept the country great. It was, I mean, I'm going to get flack for saying this, but it was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant Christians in many ways that kept the country great. It wasn't what the government was doing. I think that to the extent that the government, especially under FDR and Woodrow Wilson and even JFK, LBJ, and many of the Republican presidents in between, to the extent that they were facilitating and pushing this kind of idea, pushing this movement forward, yes, you got some what you can call good propaganda out of that in terms of this iconography and symbolism of America being great and pride in country. You did get some of that out of there, but it was really the salt of the earth American people who were showing up to work, quite frankly, who made America great. So I don't think it was this what the feds were doing or what that so-called expert class was. I'm hoping I'm answering your question.
You totally understood my question. Thank you, Chad. Amazing answer.
I got to do a quick out chat. I got to say bye. Thank you, man, and we'll have you back when the movie's out. I want you to come back and get into it even more. So thank you, man.
Thank you for having me.
Amazing. Back in a moment, folks.